You are live.
Hello, everyone. I am super excited. Today I have Courtney Mcleod and Toby Fairley on. We are going to talk everything finances. It's so funny. I always have these conversations with them. And one of them, well, the majority is always about money and finances, but it's so funny how designers are in business and they're not profitable. And it's not funny, it's kind of sad. And instead of getting help and seeking out business coaches or people who are savvy with their books, you just keep digging yourself deeper into a hole. So today I just want to give you the opportunity to hear the conversations that I normally have with them privately. And you can ask questions and I'll have Annie read them out later on. But right now, Toby, go ahead, tell the people a little bit about you, my friend.
All right. I have been an interior designer for almost 21 years, which is hard to imagine that it's been that long. And I'm based in Little Rock, Arkansas, but have worked all over the world. Well, the country mainly, sometimes occasionally outside the country. And let's see, I've had a business consulting firm for about 13 years, I think now. And part of that business consulting is my Design You coaching program, which is almost 3 years old. So still doing projects. Gail, you asked me again earlier today, you're like, do you still do full on ordering? And yes, I do, but I only take the clients that I really, really love these days. And that's kind of the benefit of having additional revenue streams and building kind of both, what I call kind of both parts of my business, is it allows me to take the clients that I really want and say no to the ones that aren't a fit. So I think that's it. I have a 15-year-old daughter. My husband's an attorney and we still live in Little Rock.
Nice. Thank you so much, Toby. And thank you for your beautiful work. Courtney, go ahead. Tell the people about you, my friend.
Hi, everybody. And thank you, Gail, for having me on. My name is Courtney Mcleod. I'm the principal of Right Meets Left Interior Design. We're based in New York City. I started the company, gosh, we turned 8 this summer, which was pretty amazing. I'm really excited about that. I'm actually a career changer. I spent 15 years in real estate private equity, so very different world, but have been obsessed with design and the decorative arts in general, forever. So it was really, my second act and a chance to really, pursue my true passion. And I just feel really lucky to be able to do what I love every day.
Yay. Thank you so much, Courtney. I really appreciate you. In the room before that, I remember that we did the show house together, which was cool. So let's get down to it. I always hear people say, well, yeah, they make 6 figures, or they're $1 million business, or, she's a boss, she makes $1 million. When you hear that, and I've said it to both of you, what do you think of that? Because I think when people hear that, they think that person is bringing in, like, pocketing, going home, it's in the bank, $1 million. And what is the truth of it all? Toby, you want to go first? Well, Courtney, go ahead.
No. And then I'll follow it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, my honest reaction when I hear that is I cringe a little bit, because I feel like it is such an ego number, and $1 million in revenue tells me not very much about your business, not really. And it certainly doesn't tell me, what your lifestyle is like, i.e. what's in your pocket. So, when I hear that number, I when I hear that number and that's it, as sort of a gauge of success within a business, I just, I question what's really going on, because I do think that a lot of people, present a certain picture, and, it's not necessarily, the accurate, analysis of their business. And so I wish people would be, a little less dazzled by the quote unquote $1 million business. It's a great milestone, don't get me wrong at all. But you can make more money with $500,000 business if you're doing things correctly versus if you have $1 million business and you're just, approaching it all the wrong way. So, it's always just a caveat with that quote unquote $1 million business.
Toby?
Yeah, I think it's just like Courtney said, you just don't know what that means. It could mean any number of things. And over the years that I've worked with people in business consulting, I remember one client in particular, a person I really, really love, and she was really struggling to keep her head above water, not just financially, but on kind of bandwidth wise, like, why is this so hard? Why do I have so much work? Why does it never seem to take off? And when we looked at her numbers, exactly like Courtney's saying, she was bringing in $1 million in revenue and her profit was 6%. 6%. That is not even, I mean, the amount of work that goes into selling $1 million of interiors and ordering product and handling all those details, it is not sustainable on low profit margin. And that's one of the problems with our industry in general. And a lot of creative industries is we're looking at, if we're lucky, a lot of times a profit margin of 30%. And that's usually not that sustainable. So I think that what I love to ask people, which is a much better question, instead of, and it's kind of what Courtney alluded to, instead of how much revenue do you want to make, or are you making, how much money do you want to make? Because a lot of these people aren't even paying themselves at all. They're literally just, maybe breaking even or barely keeping their head above water, but all their funds go to pay their team if they have one, or to kind of keep the business going. And I want to say, like Courtney said, if you want to make $250,000 a year personal income, let's look at the smallest business that you can have and still hit those numbers, because that's so much more sustainable than trying to say, let's hit $1 million business. Now, if you have $1 million business and it's profitable, great. That's wonderful if it's sustainable. But I think people just confuse revenue and profit and salary and take home. And what most people assume is if I'm making $1 million, then that'll mean I'm making a lot more money. But unless you engineer your business to make profits, that's not a given. You can totally have $1 million in revenue and be spending more than $1 million to keep that machine going.
And Toby, I love the way you said it, that part of the goal really should be, I want to make X dollars. What's the smallest business that I can make that money? That is actually impressive.
I agree. Yeah. And when I teach people to have other revenue streams and start creating some like digital revenue streams that might have a 70 or 80 or 90% profit margin, then you start to look at the difference and you're like, whoa, I can make 30% of $1 million, which is 300,000, or I can make 90% of a $500,000 business, which is what, over $400,000 with a lot smaller business. That's more of a sweet spot. And I think people just don't understand the equation, the math behind it, which is fine. Like, not that we would, unless I have an accounting degree and an MBA. I know Courtney has a business degree from Wharton School of Business. So unless you went that path, you're not going to know, and you don't have to be ashamed of it. But learning the difference in profit versus revenue is a huge game changer when you think about how to design a sustainable business. And I don't mean sustainable green. I mean like that it's a going concern that you can keep up with and it's not killing you in the process, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I'll be honest, for years in the beginning for me, I was kind of playing a little bit, and I was just so happy to be doing this. And I was like, oh, I'm so excited. And, and I made that mistake that every designer has made, where you're like working on a project and you're like, oh, this item, it would make it so spectacular, but it'd be so expensive with my, full markup. So I'm only gonna, charge X. And it's so easy to fall into that trap. And then you get to the end of the year and you look at your margin and you're like, oh my goodness. And so it took me years to disconnect from that desire to make a project, as creatively fulfilling or as beautiful as I know it could be, versus, what's the most beautiful business I can make. And, it took me time to really own that and to say, I know better than what I'm doing. And so I really need to implement these practices. And so I think that, again, that's a place where people trip up, is that day-to-day decision. Oh, I won't take my, 30% of margin or whatever. I'll take 5% on this item. I'll take 10% on this item. It's like you just got to stop yourself. It's like, don't do that.
That come to my mind that I talk about a lot with people is, one, are you more attached to the end result than you are attached to making a profit? And I would say for probably 80% of the creatives I know, the answer is yes. And they assume that if they just work hard enough, or if enough time passes, then they'll magically start making money. But you don't, because if you've created a business where you're constantly killing your own profits, where is it going to come from? It's not going to magically show up, right? And so kind of the other piece of that I ask people a lot is, why do you feel like it's your responsibility to help people have something either that they can afford or that they're not willing to pay for? And that's a really important question to ask, because we're taking food out of our own mouths or our families' mouths if we have families, and consistently undercutting ourselves because some part of us is a people pleaser, or we want that pretty image, and we're like, oh, I would love for them to have it. And I remind people, every time you do what Courtney just described, you are literally taking money out of your bank account. And
it's true. Yeah.
And so I think of it as non-cash currency. So if you're getting paid in ego strokes, in validation, in pretty portfolio pictures, if you're getting paid in something besides cash, you're still getting paid, but the cash isn't going to show up later. You took that money, the equivalent to that. You kind of bartered in ego stroking or portfolio pictures, and you might as well put a dollar value on those because you didn't put that money in your bank account.
Wow. Let's talk about the bank account. As Mike Mcleod calls it, the bank balance accounting. What I think people think what's in their bank account, they're like, oh, that's my money. Oh, I made money. And then it's a big misconception, because after you pay your expenses, your taxes, your employees, like you're in the red. And here's the other thing.
All other people's money that should be assigned for their sofa or whatever, and you're spending it on payroll or something. Yeah.
So that's, well, there's so much I want to talk about here. With the bank accounts, I know that there are still designers out there that don't separate their money, whether they keep it with their personal, which is a big no-no, or that they just have one bank account and they put all the money in there. And so they're paying bills and doing stuff. And when it comes time to pay for the client's product, they don't have the money to do that. Why are they not getting it? And I feel like if it's happened once, okay, say it happens 3 times, then now shame on you, because you should be seeking someone out and going, why is this? The person gave me the 100,000, but now I don't have money to pay off the balances to get their furniture in here. What are the things that they are doing wrong?
If I could, posit something, it's that the bank account isn't the real problem. The real problem is that you're disconnected from the financials of your business. You're disconnected from the financials of your individual projects. And, at the end of the day, someone asked, what can I do to sort of, boost my margin? The number one thing you can do is to get more comfortable and familiar with your books. And if it's not a natural place for you, no problem. Have a great bookkeeper. Have that bookkeeper making sure your books are up to date, daily or weekly at the max. And then you need to be in those numbers at least once a week. Because if you are in there looking at those numbers, there is no way for you to end up surprised, regardless of what's happening with your actual physical bank accounts. So I think the bank account issue is a symptom of a more fundamental problem. I think also that connection to your books, when you really see what's happening, that's like that trigger where you're like, like we're talking about the margin, like, oh, last week I reduced my margin to 5% a few times. And then you start to look and you're like, oh crap, I was targeting X on this project and now I'm tracking at Y. And so then this week you're like, you know what, I'm not sacrificing my margin at all. So it's really like a trigger, like a motivating trigger. But there's this mindset that, and Toby, I'm sure you can speak to this better than I can. There's this mindset of fear around the books, fear around the numbers. That's not me. Blah 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 blah. Miss Gail, I'm looking at
Listen,
you.
I've had this conversation with both of you.
Yes,
I
many
will put
times.
myself out there and be like,
and that's why the thing is, like, find a fantastic bookkeeper. Invest in that, because that is a worthy place to invest your money. Like that is gonna return dividends like you would not believe.
Can I just jump in there for a second, which is super funny, because a couple of months ago, I was interviewing someone for a podcast, and I'm like, what's the first thing a person should invest in their business, or who should they hire? And they're like, oh, a branding coach. And I was like, why not, a bookkeeper or something? They're like, oh, no, you should be able to do that at first. And then you want to get the brand tight and everything will fall into place. But I was like, but don't you want to know where your numbers are first? Like, after, speaking to you all for so long, I was like, well, they're absolutely right. I don't see why, like, that's always an afterthought, because it's the branding coach, it's the website, it's, the person that can handle your Instagram account, it's the person that's handling your Facebook. And I was like, why not the person that can help you make sure you're on track and making money to pay money? And let's also talk about, Toby, you can talk to this, and so can you, Courtney. Toby used to have the storefront, you used to have brick and mortar, you had the staff, you had all that, and then you gave it up. And tell me why.
Well, for one thing, the storefront, and I do want to speak back to a couple of things on the last question too. I feel like, okay,
there's a lot to unleash here.
Not to be partisan here, but I feel like that we're in the debate and I'm trying not to answer the question that you're asking me. So, let me go back to that one. So first I'm going to answer the question you asked me. Then I want to speak to that other thing. But the thing about the retail store, which is every person's dream, a couple of things happened there. For one, I found myself shopping almost like a buffering tactic. It was so fun to go buy all these things at market and scratch my creative itch. But at the end of the day, I learned pretty quickly that's basically, if it doesn't sell, I own it. So just like I said about non-cash currency, if I've got a bunch of money sitting in inventory, that's my cash. That's the cash that could be paying for my car, could be paying off my house, could be paying off anything. And it's sitting there in inventory that may or may not sell. So a retail store is its own thing and it's its own risk. And when you're trying to run a profitable design business and a retail store, they're really two different businesses if you're going to do them well. And I could have done either one of them well, but consistently I made more money in design. And so it was just a big distraction. And for years I told myself, oh, I needed it. It was like the way to get people in the door. But more that when I closed my retail shop way back in 2009, around the previous recession. And my business only grew from there because I got all the time back from that distraction and I got to really focus on fun. So yeah. And a lot of people want that. And again, that's when I ask, like, what is it that we're doing in our business? If our business itself isn't scratching our creative itch, if we're not feeling fulfilled and we want to open a shop, it makes me say, then look at your clients. Why are you not fulfilled? Is it because you're taking the wrong client and doing these miserable tiny budgets and it's never fun, it's exhausting you? So you're like, well, I'll go get me a store because that'll be fun. Because that's not, a new revenue stream never fixes an old broken revenue stream. You got to fix the one that's broken, and you can't just keep adding on and hope, well, this new thing will fund the other thing. But we want to pretend like it does. We're like, oh, this will be so fun. I'll get all this attention. It's really just an expense and a distraction for the most part. And just quickly back to Courtney's other point about the bank accounts, looking at your bank account and really not knowing your finances. I completely agree with her. And one of the things that's so important to know is what your net numbers are, because I think just like, when you have an employee and they see you depositing a $300,000 check and they think, oh, well, I need a raise. They're paying me beans and they're rolling in the dough. Also CEOs and principal designers forget that that whole $300,000 is not there. And so I only think in net numbers. So when I price a project and I price all the product and the everything, the fees, all of it, I know before I even give it to the client how much of that number that I'm presenting is my net number. So when somebody gives me a big check, I don't ever assume that whole, let's say the number 300,000 that I use, that's my money. It's not. I know 60 or 70% of that is spoken for already. I tuck it over in another account and I forget it's even there because it's so tempting to see that number there. And you're like, oh, I just need to dip into that a little bit. Oh, I just need to pay myself or make my house payment or pay my team or whatever. That's not your money. And if we're being perfectly honest, that's really, it borderlines on illegal. You're in a contract with a person that you took their money and said you would, be a steward of that money and pay the cost of goods sold for them to get their stuff. And if you're dipping into it all the time and may get caught without being able to afford to pay for their things, that is a very serious mismanagement of funds. So I never think of that as my money. So I go in knowing, if this is a $50,000 proposal, how much of it is mine? And it might be 15,000, 20,000, 25. And I know that's all that I have to operate on. And if that's not enough, I got to start changing some things, but I'm always looking at the net numbers before I even give it to the client. And to Courtney's point, if you start taking away your own discount, your net number gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And before you know it, you're in that situation of the $1 million business with a 6% profit. So it's not innocent to just kind of click away at your discounts and pretend like, oh, it'll be fine this time. It's not going to be fine. You're going to get yourself into a situation that you can't really afford to operate your business.
It's really true. And I think to your point about focusing on the net number from the very beginning, if you're, sort of tracking potential business, like I keep a pipeline of, potential projects, proposals I have out, things like that. When I'm looking at, okay, what does that mean financially for my business? I, estimate what, our time billing would be on it. I estimate what the sales would be, but the real number is I then multiply that by my margin. And then that's the number, that's actually the number that I focus on, because it could be a big fat number. And then by the time you get to the bottom, it's still a good number, but it's a totally different world. So I think that's really, really good advice. If you just really focus on that net number from the very beginning, you're not sort of cloudy, you're not sort of dazzled by a number that, to Toby's point, it's not your money in any way, shape, or form.
I would even add on top of that your time, because if you're like, okay, well, this seems like a really good job, they're going to spend $100,000, but whatever, your margin, if you're kind of dinging your profits all the time and discounting, and at the end of the day, you're only going to make $20,000 on it. And you're like, but I'm going to spend so many hours that I couldn't possibly take another job. Like you gotta match up the profit and the time investment to deliver on that thing, because people just keep saying yes to more and more jobs and they get themselves in a bind where they can't deliver. They don't have enough bandwidth, as I call it, but they also don't have enough money. And that's where you kind of get upside down in your business, because you've obligated yourself to all these jobs, but they're still not paying your bills because you weren't making enough on them. And you're stuck because you're like, well, there's no more time in the day. I can't add any more clients and I'm exhausted. That's where the math doesn't work. So even to keep going on Courtney's point and mine previously, is the net number and how much time it takes to deliver it. Because if you're kind of doing a design only or a design in a day and it's pretty decent profit, okay, do that all day long. But if it's like, this is a 9-month job, it's going to take hundreds of hours a month, and I'm taking a tiny little profit here, a lot of times those are not sustainable. They look exciting. We already see them on the pages of a magazine in our head. We're like, ooh, this dreamy client. And then everything goes awry, and you're lucky if they haven't fired you at the end of this thing, and you're exhausted and you're mad at them and they're mad at you. And it's all because you made an uninformed business decision about your profits and the amount of time it's going to take to make that money, which a lot of times we have that equation wrong and kind of upside down.
So
yeah, and oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm listening. Like, these are my two gurus. I do want to say that it's very funny that people think that if you have like 20 clients in a year, you're making a lot of money. You can also have 3 clients for the year and then make more than the 20 that you have, correct?
Yeah,
100%.
Your service to 3 people than 20 people, right? So, you know, and to me, the best case scenario is 3 amazing clients and some other revenue streams that that have a higher profit margin and don't take as much of my time to balance out that cash flow. That's the sweetest spot ever. And that's how I like to work now. Yes, to only the people who get it, only the people who are really going to spend the money and the time and let me do my thing creatively. And then other things in my business that help really fill in that gap so that I can stay focused on giving my best service.
Can I just mention one more thing, Courtney, and I'll let you jump in. With the whole advent of COVID, all of a sudden it seemed like every designer turned to e-design. And I just was thinking, like, how profitable is that? And e-design is not real design of what you do. And people are trying to make it seem like they're making money hand over fist with e-design. What is your take on it? I'll let you go first, Courtney, because Toby, I know you got a lot to say about it.
Yeah, you know, when COVID first happened, I did see a rush to that direction. I tend to be a person who I like to sit back for a minute and process. And the number one thing for me was, regardless of what's going on around me, what kind of business do I want? Is e-design what I want to be doing? Is that how I want to structure my business? And I knew the answer was an absolute no. So I did not make moves to make that happen. And I think more than a few people, the answer was probably no, but there was panic and there was like, you know, let's do it. Mm-hmm. You know, my observations from afar with e-design, I would think that, you know, really good processes, you know, sort of making things kind of very repetitive in a way is the way that you can make money there. I do think it's harder to make money there for sure. So for me, it isn't what I want to do. No offense to anyone else who is fabulously successful doing it. That's awesome. But I think number one, you know, why put yourself into a job, a career or work that, you know, you don't want to be doing.
True. Toby, go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, so I love digital products or scalable products, but I think where people get confused is what doesn't work is taking full service interior design or any full service one-on-one creative thing and shoving it into a cheaper price point to try to get a customer to buy, because we know how many hours that takes. And so this is where people get messed up, because they're like, oh, well, I'll just do everything I was doing, but I'll just slash the price. Well, that's never going to work. So you can create all kinds of digital products or smaller one-on-one services or kind of design in a day things that aren't, quote, e-design. Because I tested this model a long time ago. I used to have a service called Inbox Interiors. We had it for about 3 or 4 years because I'm always willing to try things. And what we found is we could never do one of those rooms for less than about 60 hours. And so we had to, you know, we would have had to make even $100 an hour. That's $6,000 for that kind of selecting and letting people buy and that sort of thing. So the math really doesn't work. But can you create other things, other services and ways to meet people where they are, or create some type of a course or something? Yes. And the caveat even applies for the course, because if you think you're going to just take your whole full service thing and just create this general course that everybody's going to rush and do, that's just a race to the bottom. And there's going to be millions of them out there, and they're all going to be cheap. So it still goes back to what Courtney said. Who's your client? What do you want to help people with? And yeah, we help people all the time create really cool things that are digital products for interior designers or other people. One of the people that I've worked with has done 200,000 in the last year with a course, and she's a chair designer, but her chairs are like $2,000. And I helped her create a course on how to design and upholster your own chairs. Well, that customer that's going to do that was never going to buy her $2,000 chair. So that's a beautiful way to show up online and fill a whole void. But she wasn't just trying to sell her $2,000 chair for a lot less price. She was hitting a different customer, a different part of the market. So you got to be savvy, and it is absolutely not going to work for you if you intend to have a full service option and keep it as it's expensive as it always was, or even that it should be, that it may not be expensive enough, and then try to do the same exact thing for cheaper, because you're cannibalizing your own high-end product. And why would anybody ever buy the high-end thing again if they could get it for half the price or a fraction of the price? So yes, digital products work, but no, just shoving everything you were doing and including all of it and slapping a cheaper price on it does not ever work. And it just exacerbates the problem we've been talking about, which is you're not charging enough for that level of service. And I think one last thing to say about it is, the other part of it is, what the truth is the client doesn't really want to do their own shopping for the most part. These people that you're trying, they just want you and your whole full service thing for cheap. And so if that's the case, that's just a no to that client. It's just a no. And so giving people a loophole or a workaround to get you and your full service thing cheaper is a bad idea. But if you have a different idea that meets another part of the market that you can actually make a high margin on, that is how you can show up in a different way and really start to make some money. But it's not what most people are doing. They don't understand the equation.
No,
I was actually, oh, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to jump in real quick. It's funny because at the beginning of COVID, Toby and I had a conversation, and I won't say who, but somebody was being interviewed on a webinar, and they said the first thing designers should do is either, would you say, do it for free or slash their prices? And you were like, no.
No. I mean, if you're cutting price, they're getting a different service. Like if this thing was always worth this amount, why is it suddenly worth half that? No, you maintain the quality and the sort of experience at the high end, but yeah, you can introduce another service, another offering, but it is never going to work if it's just that thing cheaper. It's just not. There was a reason. I mean, in fact, most people already needed to raise their price, not slash their price. So yeah, I'm like, no, don't ever. We watched that happen in the 2009 recession, and we've just now kind of recovered from it. And then here people go slashing prices again out of fear. So bad idea.
I was on a panel and I thought another designer had such a great idea, which I want to try to implement for myself, which he said, I just put in my calendar, I have like 2 free hours, like 2 separate 1 hours just in my calendar. It's the same time, like every week. And I just put it in Calendly as available. And then someone can book it if they want. It's a discrete 1 hour. We can talk about whatever you want, paint recommendations, let's look at your house, whatever, but it's discrete. That's it. And he was like, I know on Monday if it's booked, and then it's just this like easy, just kind of extra money, low effort on my part. There isn't a whole, it isn't e-design, and then it starts to kind of like snowball into something else. And it's a way, I'm sure a lot of us find this like on social media. You'll have people contact you and they'll say, oh, I love your work. I can't afford you, but maybe one day, I'm doing my own home and your inspiration. And he was like, this is a way for them to have some access. And it's a way for me to make a little extra money. It's no big deal. And he was like, yeah, I'm it's booked most of the time. And I thought, that's like I kind of like that. It's just an easy way to, I think, again, it's not a client that's ever going to hire you for the full service interior design. But I actually enjoy interacting to some extent, with folks that are on a budget. I mean, a big budget doesn't make you a good person. Like I like having those interactions.
Or a good designer either, really.
Or a good designer, and maybe it really is, you just need some help on a paint color, or a little help, move that chair, 6 inches that way. And it can make such a huge difference. And, I think, I just thought that was just a simple, easy, using a digital tool to make it apps completely like no work for you really, to set it up. And so I really liked that. I think I'm gonna maybe put that in.
They're listening now. What do you ladies think about niching?
I mean, I think it's highly important, and I think people are mostly afraid to do it, don't want to do it. And all they think about is who they're cutting out as a potential client, which is so funny to me, because I'm always like, why are you now worrying about the people who already weren't hiring you? Like if they were going to have been hiring you, they would have been hiring you all the rest of the time you've been a generalist, right? But why not go all in so that one specific particular group of people can absolutely know when they read your content, when they follow you, when they hear who you work for, oh, she's my person. And so, and of course, if somebody else comes along and maybe say your niche is to work with like bachelors in urban environments, and you're like, oh, a friend's mom who has a Southern home comes along, okay, fine, you can work with them. Niching is a marketing tool. It doesn't mean that, oh no, I could never work with you. But usually what I think people find is if they'll create a niche that they really love, that is their sweet spot anyway, they don't even want to take that other job, because it's a lot harder and they have to get all new vendors or resources or do research. And so there's just so much beauty in constraining the people you're talking to, constraining the looks and the resources and the products you have to have. And I think one of the biggest problems in our businesses, profit-wise and exhaustion bandwidth-wise, is that we don't constrain anything as creatives. We're like, oh, I work for everybody and we do everything and all the time. And that is just too much to keep up with. It's exhausting, and it's harder to dial in what's working. Like Courtney and I both talk a lot about measuring like your pipeline and your marketing and all of the stuff. If you're everything to everybody all the time, it gets really difficult to know what's working and if the messaging's working and if it's converting. And so most of us just go around with no information. We're just like, I don't know, I'm just whatever you want, we'll do all of it. But nothing ever gets any better about their businesses. So I'm a big fan of that. It takes some major mindset work because people are afraid. But I always say, if you haven't tried a niche strategy, how's it working for you? Because most of the people that are afraid to do it are like, I have no business, I don't have enough, whatever, I'm not making any money. And I'm like, yeah, how's that working for you? How might it work if you try this other approach?
So this is such a fantastic topic, because I struggled with this for so long because I didn't want to believe the good advice. And it really was probably the first 5 years of my business where I was like, I can't niche. I'm going to, turn away all these potential people that would never hire me anyway, But again, I really, as I look in hindsight, I think if this is a symptom of another problem, the problem being lack of confidence in whatever creative area you excel. And I think for me, when I was able to really make that switch was when the creative confidence kicked in, because I was coming from a finance world. I'd never considered myself a creative person. And it took years to really own it. And, my aesthetic, it's very joyful and colorful and happy. And I was like, oh, I can't, put that out there. And then once I actually did, miraculously, the clients I was getting were way better. I was having more fun on my projects. And something else that was unexpected was that I applied that strategy to my social media. And it really helped me to find an authentic voice, which I found became very attractive to brands. And that ended up opening up another revenue stream, which is, sort of the quote unquote influencer thing. And, brands have approached me and they all say the same thing. I like your aesthetic. It's this, your voice is this, and they all say the same thing. And so, that tells me that I'm communicating something consistently and clearly. So, I think if you're sitting back and you're like, I hear you, but I just don't know, maybe take a little bit of a deeper look and see if there's something else there, like if there's a confidence issue there, because I think that's really the root.
Wow. Annie, sorry, everybody, I'm coughing a little bit dry throat here, which is crazy. Annie, do we have any questions? Because I keep seeing people saying thank you to the panel for the advice and they're really excited. Do you want to read any questions for us or have us answer?
Yeah, we have a few. Allison asks, is there some sort of introductory business course recommended for designers without an accounting/business background for learning how to read account statements and teach about things like profit versus revenue?
Ladies?
I mean, for sure, reading the book Profit First, which is an inexpensive way. I don't want to use this to just like plug myself, but I do this work with people. But I also, you don't have to necessarily hire someone to get started. You can listen to my podcast. You can go listen to finance podcasts. You can read Mike McAllowit's book on Profit First. There's so many resources out there. But it is so important that you start this process. I think reading that book as just kind of like a primer for understanding money in a simple way is a very good place to start. And then also, I would throw in a whole other book, which is called You're a Badass at Making Money, because people's money mindset gets as much as the financials themselves. And so getting out of scarcity mindset and being afraid to spend money and all of that is just as important as going, what spreadsheet should I use? And what percent of profit should I be making on something? You got to have both kind of the mindset and the tactical piece of this coming together.
Yeah. Profit First is a great book. There's also one, Profit is a Choice. That's also something I really enjoyed. But yeah, I mean, a book or, a consultant like Toby, again, 100% that's a good place Toby. To invest.
I mean 100% Toby. That's all I'm going to keep saying.
The program's not open right now. It'll open back soon, but you can get on our wait list. But inside the Design You Coaching program, we have a course I created called Financials for Creatives for this very reason. But you can also get a lot out of listening to some of the episodes of my podcast. If you can't afford right now to invest in a coach, please invest in a book. Please start listening to some podcasts and get familiar with the language. It's not as hard as we think it is. It is really not that hard at all. If you can run a full service design project with 1 million details, you can absolutely understand your finances if you're willing to believe that it's not hard.
Yeah, because you don't have to be a CPA. You don't have to know everything about accounting and bookkeeping. I mean, really, there is just a few key things that you need to understand, partnered with a good bookkeeper. Like, it's so much easier than you're thinking in your mind right now. And I think it's really just getting yourself set up. I think that's probably the hardest part. And so it's like the book, the podcast, the business consultant, that's how you do it. I mean, that's the answer.
And let me say to everybody who's like, well, oh my gosh, she's got an accounting degree, or Courtney went to business school. I've never done my own books a single day of the 21 years of my business on purpose. I use my information to allow me to understand reports. But if you're in the trenches of your own books when you're not an accountant, you're not maximizing your business, A, and you also can't be simultaneously in the trenches and at the 40,000 foot view. And as owners of our business, we got to be up in that visionary role. looking across our financials, making decisions with them, not the ones that are creating the reports. So I think it's so important, back to your point, Gail, of who do you hire first? From the very first day I opened my doors, I hired a bookkeeper and a tax accountant to do the yearly stuff, because I wanted them giving me the most accurate information. And then I could use my knowledge to be able to read those reports. And so if all you've got to learn to do is read the reports to make decisions, that's a completely different undertaking than learning to be your own bookkeeper. And I would say 90% of the people I talk to in creative businesses tell me they're their own bookkeeper. And it just makes me want to faint. Like, I'm like, no, don't do it.
Don't do it.
You know, I'd also add to that, you know, remember your books are they're just the output. What you're doing on a daily basis in your business is the input. And that's really the most important part. I actually think a really robust project management software can kind of help to bridge that gap a little bit too. You know, as you're doing your proposals and orders and invoices, if you're entering that into a system that's kind of automatically updating, it's a really helpful way to find the connection to your quote unquote books, you know, this like, you know, amorphous thing, who knows what that means. You know, so I think, remember the books, they're a tool, they're the result. So if all you're doing is, oh, what's the result? I mean, that's secondary at the end. It's really the inputs that are the most important. And if your inputs are good, your outputs will inevitably be really, really good.
Wow, that's a great point, because that's back to your point of, if you're constantly, you know, not only, you know, knocking off your profit margin, but what I see so many people doing is, oh, well, I really spent 12 hours selecting that sofa, but this client's going to flip, so I'm only going to charge them for 4. Like, if you're constantly knocking off your time or your profits, and that's what Courtney means when I think when you say your inputs, if you're not doing best business practices yourself, you can't magically make your books show a profit. They are just the data, is kind of what you're saying, Courtney, right? The mirror of what you're doing in your day-to-day business practices. And I think that's so important.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if you're looking for 2 simple things you can do immediately, number 1, set a target margin, product margin, and stick to it. Period. No excuses. Stick to it on every single thing you purchase for a project. That's number 1. Number 2, set a target time billing hours. I like to look at it for weekly. I like to kind of break it down into those chunks. I find it helps just me mentally get a handle on it. Have the target and hit that target every single week. No question, no excuses, period. 2 things, that's it. If you get those 2 inputs right, your books are going to magically, they're going to be like, oh, suddenly my books are much better. So yeah, so if you're looking for just 2 simple, immediate things that are, you know, they're execution simple, but it's mentally, they're really challenging. And I know from experience, because I have gone through this whole cycle in my own business. And once you get to the other side and you drink the Kool-Aid and you realize, okay, I see what's happening. It's just so good. It's so good because you work your butt off, and then at the end you got something to show for it, and you're like, yes, feels good.
I want to say, like, there's 12 minutes left, and I see like people keep asking questions in there. We're going to take one more question, but I just want to share with the people who have signed up for this webinar. I can't say enough great things about Toby and Courtney. I literally call them and I will be like, I'm going to ask you a question that's really stupid. And they're so patient. And I am not business, I'm not Wharton School or like accounting smart that way, but they have the patience to make me understand. And I think when you do that for your business, you will really kick yourself in the butt being like, why did I take so long to get there? We can't just be creative and not be profitable, because that's just foolishness. You need to be, because the creativity really is 10% of the 100% business. So if it's 100%, 10% is creativity, then 90% is you have to make sure you're profitable and you're working on and in your business to be there. So don't be ashamed. When Toby opens up Design You again, you really need to like get in there. I'm sure you could DM Courtney, just ask her. I don't know. Annie, we'll take one more question because we have 10 minutes left.
Too. I mean, I'm happy. I mean, just like Courtney said earlier, I'm happy to have these conversations with you guys. Everybody just, and we'll talk about where to find, you know, both of us, I'm sure. But I'm on Instagram all the time. It's really me in my inbox. People will be like, is this really Toby? Yeah, it's me.
It is.
Like, ask me your questions there. I'm happy to point you in the right direction or tell you if something we offer serves it or solves it, or if there's a book or if there's something I did. I mean, I'm so happy to have those conversations with people all the time. And I think I actually have something that my marketing team put together that's a freebie that I'll mention in a minute before we go, that they can sign up and get some information about stuff. Because I'm all about giving y'all as much free content as possible. We're not just trying to drive people in our program if we're not a fit for you. We want you in there if we can help you. But I also consistently put out as much helpful information on my podcast and other places as I possibly can. So I want to hear from you guys. What are you struggling with? What do you need to know? And we'll keep addressing those things.
And can I just say, Toby's podcast is fire. It's really, 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 really good. And you should really listen to it. You know, but Courtney's my friend, so I DM her all the time and text her. So
no, but also if I could add one last thing, none of us are perfect. We're all constantly improving. You know, I'm constantly finding things in my business that I could do better. I'm constantly finding mistakes that so don't get this idea that like, you know, I'm sitting here on a cloud of perfection. You know, like it's, you know, we're all a work in progress, and that's okay. You know, start where you are. You're good. Start where you are and go from there. You know, don't feel like you need to be at some perfect level.
Yeah, and I think the thing I would just add to that too, Courtney, I love that you said that, because people do get so intimidated and they're like, oh, they have the it factor or they have the degree or whatever. I'm just like Courtney, I had all the degrees possible and I still made all the mistakes, every one of them. I still got in debt. I still undercharged. I did everything. But I think also understanding that this is not something you fix one time and forget about it. No. If as long as you are in business for the rest of the life of your business, you need to be looking every week at, do I need to change anything or tweak anything? Or is this still selling? Or should I raise my prices or do something differently? And so it's not, everybody's like, oh, I just want to get that set. As long as you have that mindset, you're going to constantly be resistant to this work. This is what it is like to own a business. And so you got to get, just honestly, I think you got to fall in love with the business part of your business and practice not being afraid of it and thinking, well, I'm going to have to do this forever. I might as well start to relax about it, to maybe learn a little more about it, to not make it such a big deal, because you definitely can't just fix it and forget about it. That is not an option.
No.
And Toby, do you think, you know, like if you spend the time and you're like, you know what, I don't like this business stuff, I hate doing it, you know, maybe you should be a designer and not necessarily a business owner, you know, go in and work with someone and let them do all of that crap, you know. You have to love being a business owner. Yes. Kind of first, right? Even more than being a designer, if you're going to have your own firm.
Members now, April had her own business for 15 years and she was like, I'm just going to be honest, I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm like, well, then by all means, come be an absolute superstar in my business, because I need you. And honestly, we were just talking today because she's so valuable to me and she does such a great job. And we're talking about her goals, like how much money she would like to make for me. And I'm like, well, I want you to make a lot of money, because if you're making a lot of money, I'm also making a lot of money. And so like, there is a role, you're right, for some people who thought they wanted, quote, the freedom of owning your own business, which we all know now there's none of that.
There's no freedom.
I always say You have the
No.
freedom to work whichever 18 hours a day you want. So like, if you're not into that, and Courtney, you're so right, there is no shame in deciding that maybe I'm just a better instrumental piece of someone else's team. And let me find a team who's really willing to pay me well and allow me to grow, because businesses need good people, because we can't do this by ourselves. We absolutely can't. I love that you said that. So many good, you can tell I'm like all in my business head, and Courtney's so thoughtful. She's like, don't maybe you shouldn't know. I mean, I love the way you think, Courtney, because it's so true. You can't just stay tunnel visioned about the math all the time. You also have to look at the bigger picture of this and go, does this feel good? Is it fun anymore? Am I loving what I'm doing? Or is it really just a bigger burden, all without, the profit to go with it? So I think that's
so true. Well, we have like 5 more minutes. So Toby, you said you wanted to share something and offer something.
Toby, at tobyfairley.com/finance. You can get a freebie from us, which actually talks a lot. I put this thing together several months ago that I called my design manifesto. And it's basically all the things that are wrong with the design business and how to start to mitigate those things. And it's a lot of what we've talked about today, but it breaks it down on paper. So if y'all want to get that and read it, it'll come to you in email form. You absolutely can. And then you'll be on our list if you want to know when Design U opens up again. Or if you just want to know when that happens and you don't want the other thing, you can just go to tobyfairley.com/designu and just sign in, and we'll send you an email when we open up again. But if you have the time, I highly recommend reading this I don't mince words, but it's a lot about what's broken about the business that like we've talked about today, and helping you start to get your head around that. And I think it's very helpful.
It is. And Courtney, where can people find you, my love?
Sure. Well, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Right Meets Left Interior Design, and it's 100% me. So feel free to reach out. And you can also find me on my website. It's RMLID, rightmeetsleftinteriordesign.com.
Well, ladies, thank you so much. We have a couple of minutes before they cut us off. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that tuned in. I have to tell you, I think I'm going to ask them to come back again, because this is such a big piece of interior design that people miss the mark on daily. And it's just not a good thing to do. If you're going to be in business, you need to be 100% in business and be profitable, not just someone's like, yes, again, please. And not just, I know, I see like a lot of people still asking questions. So let me see if I could apply them with some gifts to come back.
Gifts always work.
No, but it's, you know what, we talk about everything pretty and amazing and great and beautiful, but no one ever talks about the numbers. And this is super important to me, because I'm not just doing it for you, I'm doing it for me too. And like I said, I have personal access to both, and I'm sure I drive them crazy, but they're such great, amazing sister friends that they just like, okay, whatever, and they work with me. But it's so important that if I can empower every business person, especially business woman in this industry, to look at your finances and really to become profitable, that is my ultimate goal for everybody. So I just want to say thank you, ladies, for joining me. I'll call y'all later. And to everybody else, thank you so much. And
putting us on like a 3-way call, because then you'd only have to talk once.
And I'll do that. So thank you so much, ladies. And thank you, everybody. And hopefully maybe I'll bring them back for part 2. We'll see if I can talk about it, if I can get them to do it. But this is super important. And this is something you need to do, not just for yourself, but for your business. There's absolutely no reason for you to be broke and be creative. You can be creative and profitable.
And Courtney's on my podcast. Courtney's my guest on my podcast. I think it's not this Thursday, but next Thursday. So we carry this we talk about all of this again, and we talk about Courtney's specific process for managing her pipeline. So that'll be on the Design U podcast, I think, a week from Thursday. So check that out too.
And one last thing before go ahead. Oh, if I could shout out, a word you used was empowering. And I have to say, if you're looking for an empowering podcast, Toby's, that's the one word I would use to describe it. So yes. I have to say, like, when I listen to you, I'll often listen to a bunch all at once, and then I'm like, yeah, okay.
That's my goal. Like, I'm like, if I can just give everybody the confidence in themselves that I see in them through the podcast, like that's my goal every single week. So I love to hear that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. Have a good one. Until next month. Mwah. Bye, everyone. Have a great one. Thank you so much.